Hello and welcome. Today I want to share with you about our 1,000-mile tea. So for those of you who haven't heard, but maybe kind of heard of this wildly popular, highly caffeinated tea, there is a blend that we at Sipping Streams Tea Company custom designed over 11 years ago for the international dog sled race, the Yukon Quest. This Yukon Quest is a 1,000-mile dog sled race that spans between two countries, the United States and Canada. It starts or ends in Fairbanks, Alaska, and goes to Whitehorse, Yukon territory. And this race alternates every year from where the start and the finish are. So they swap. This year, we began in Fairbanks, Alaska, and that is where our Sipping Streams Tea Company is from, and it ended in Yukon territory at Whitehorse. And it is a very extreme race that goes over multiple summits and over 3,000 feet at some points. So these dog mushers go maybe sometimes hundreds of miles before there's another checkpoint. It was one of the roughest dog sled races on the planet. Extreme temperatures that are colder than -60 below Fahrenheit, with jumbo ice on the Yukon River, which is what it means is that with the river being so huge and water still going underneath it, sometimes it builds up ice because it's so cold and pushes chunks, huge chunks of ice up. So it's not a moving tidal wave of ice, but still trying to cross in different places, essentially going over boulders of ice chunks sometimes. So this is a custom blend that I, Jenny at Sipping Streams Tea Company, decided to blend for the Yukon Quest one year over 11 years ago. I think we're going on now. We think we just finished our 12th year making this for this dog sled race. And I wanted to do something for my community and give back to my community because I was new, I was starting out, and one thing that I grew up with was the value of community from my parents. Being involved with our local cultural celebrations like Chinese New Year and doing annual dances and performances for our community, from selling at the farmer's market since I was maybe 8 or 9 years old with my mother and her Chinese vegetables. So I actually had a radio show on the classic rock station in our town for 4 years, and every Tuesday morning while construction workers and truck drivers and mothers taking their children to school, they would sit there on their way to wherever they were going and listen to me talk about tea. So one year someone said, you should make a tea for the Yukon Quest. I bet they don't realize how highly caffeinated your teas are. So it's a misnomer that coffee is necessarily more caffeinated than tea or vice versa. It really depends on that tea, its elevation, its terroir, the time of year it's been picked, the part of the plant, which part of the plant, the level of the stalk of the plant, of where it's plucked. So all those things are factors in contributing to how much caffeine content is in tea. Just because it's a black tea and is darker tasting does not mean it has more caffeine. In fact, many of our white teas have more caffeine than our black teas because they are the first fruits, the very first burst of energy that comes out of the plant and is transformed in the tea leaf. So a lot of our younger tea leaves that are early season picked are going to be higher in caffeine. And so when I first went to the Yukon Quest director, she had heard of my radio show and she said, that's great. Yeah, give us some tea. That'd be awesome if you want to make a donation and contribution. Just make sure it has a lot of caffeine. I'm like, no, I want to custom design something for you. Okay, just make sure it has a lot of caffeine. And that's her committee and her assistant. And that's all they could repeat was they just wanted a tea that was highly caffeinated. That's when I started to realize that these were non-tea drinkers. And if you have a non-tea drinker have a poor experience with tea where it tastes bitter or too strong or it's too fidgety and you need to time your tea and make sure that it doesn't oversteep, it's just too much work during a 7 to 14 day race where you have to take care of up to 14 dogs all by yourself in the middle of the wilderness, fending off wolves and moose sometimes, or, you know, herds of caribou that you might run into. So for the 1,000-mile tea, I had them name the tea because I thought it was just appropriate that if it was their tea, they could name it. So that tea actually was named by them because they said that 1 cup is enough, and it definitely can take you 1,000 miles. So this is a tea for going past 12 years now that has been at every checkpoint and dog drop along the route throughout Canada and Alaska. So this tea is actually a black and white tea. It's not a Tisane, and it actually has 4 different teas in it. I'll quickly show you what it looks like. So you'll see here it's very multicolored, but that's because we've got tips, a lot of tips, both in white tea and in black tea. And we have some black teas that I've chosen that will not get bitter. They're higher quality teas that I know that will always be very pleasant tasting and slightly sweet on their own. Because of the mushers not having time to worry about steeping their tea correctly with their 14-cup thermoses where they just throw their tea in and make it along the way, or maybe somebody else made their tea for them, and what if they're not a tea drinker or a tea connoisseur and know nothing about tea? So I wanted to make a tea that always tasted good, no matter how long it was infused for, and no matter what temperature it was made at. Now, granted, if the temperature is not hot enough, the extraction of the tea won't be there. It will just take longer, just like cold brew takes longer to be made. The same thing with the tea. If the tea water temperature isn't hot enough, it's not going to extract it. But you know, the hotter the temperature, the higher the temperature, the faster the extraction rate will be. So you can see it already starting to turn color, and I put it in an infuser. And so normally it is 2.5 grams, or like a nice substantial tablespoon per 8 ounces of boiling hot water. So it could be 205 degrees Fahrenheit. But again, this is a tea that doesn't get messed up very easily. And in fact, we now have people who are infusing it into beers, into vodka. We have several breweries in Alaska who use it for an interesting flavored beer. We even have a local award-winning distillery, Fairbanks Distillery, who made a vodka cocktail with this. So you can see it already getting dark. And so a lot of people mistakenly say that this is a black tea, but it's actually not a black tea. It is a black and white tea. So you can just infuse it in your tea ball or whatever it is. Now, if you infuse it for the correct amount of recommended time, which is 3 to 5 minutes, and don't leave it in too long, then you can re-steep it. But if you leave this in for half an hour, all the extraction, all the flavor will be concentrated in the liqueur, into the liquid cup. And if you've ever seen any of my other videos, I love drinking out of these pint glasses because, first of all, I'm a sponsor for going on 12 years that I have lots of these cups. I get a commemorative cup every year. But second of all, they're so thick and hardy that I can, you know, easily clean them, and they don't shatter with boiling hot water. So you might be wondering, what does a 1,000-mile tea taste like? Well, it has a certain 3 teas from China and 1 tea from India. And in fact, one of our India tea producers came up here several years ago and got to ride at the beginning of the Yukon Quest dog sled race. So it has a rich malty black tea, and it has a really nice sweet Chinese black tea. And then the white teas, more tippiness, more downiness, thickness, where you don't have to add any milk or sugar to it at all. So it's this balance of thick body, robust flavor, and sweetness. So if you want to put milk and sugar in it, you can, but you don't have to, and you can leave it in there, and it usually won't get too bitter. Now, I didn't steep it for that long, and you can already see the color in it is a very nice golden malty liqueur. And then I'm going to show you a cup of a local beer that was made from our local brewery here in Fairbanks, Alaska, Hoodoo Brewing, who made a Kolsch out of our tea of the 1,000 Mile. I actually haven't tried it yet. I have tried many versions of other people's beers, and you could even infuse it in some sake if you wanted to, but it really gives it a nice body and flavor to something that might be just okay or kind of plain. So you can see the beautiful color of this Kolsch bubbling up, and you can compare it to the 1,000 Mile tea liqueur. It has that same similar orange, malty kind of base notes of color. And it tastes like a Kolsch, but I taste some of that dark robustness that would be in a black tea in it. But at the same time, very, very sweet. And when I say sweet, I don't mean candy sweet. I just say natural sweetness, very pleasant. So if you have any questions at all, or if you want to share with me pictures of your tea cocktails or tea beers that you've made before, definitely share them with me. I've seen some of your tea cocktails that you have made. I've even suggested adding frozen raspberries as a good pairing, kind of like ice cubes in your cocktail if you wanted to with the 1,000 Mile tea. I love seeing great ideas about that. And if you're interested in learning more about the 1,000 Mile race, the Yukon Quest 1,000 Mile dog sled race, you can go to www.yukonquest.com to learn more about the Mushers, their dogs that they absolutely love, that are their family, and the crazy, crazy adventure of going 1,000 miles through 2 countries. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in our Sipping Streams Facebook group, the Sipping Streams Tea Tribe, and that's where you'll get access to lots of free classes and workshops. So definitely let your friends know, and if you have any questions at all on any other topics you want me to cover about tea, or the history of tea, or the infusion of tea, definitely let me know, and I would love to do those for you. Thank you so much.